Welcome back, everybody. Rodrigo Fonador here with another episode of Asheville Real Estate News. And this week, and actually today is the start of it, we're going to be trying a little bit different way we're rolling out, well, specifically this podcast, but in the future, if we get any longer podcasts or conversations that go longer, we're probably going to follow this similar format unless you tell us that you don't like it and you prefer for this to go on one long extended podcast. So today we're going to be having a conversation with actually one of my old coaches, my first coach I ever had in real estate. I think it was back 2013, 2014-ish, where he was my coach. And it was a really good experience. I learned a lot. And the reason I wanted to bring my coach back on, or ex-coach, old coach, and wanted to bring him back on the podcast was because he started talking about the effects of the coronavirus on the real estate market end of February. And from people I follow and people I talk to, who's the first person that I saw talk about it, about the possible effects. And this episode is definitely going to have a little bit more of a doom and gloom feel to it than maybe some of our other episodes. And you might disagree. And honestly, I'm still sorting through this information myself. I'm recording this intro. It's actually 2 days after we had the actual conversation because didn't have 100% good clarity on how or what I wanted to say in this intro. And basically it comes down to this is look, whether you agree or you don't agree, hearing the different perspectives and understanding where people might be coming from is going to be important. And so as you listen to my conversation with my coach, Karl Krentzel, old coach, with my conversation with Karl Krentzel, I want you to just keep in mind that this is a perspective. You can agree with it, you might not agree with it, etc. I hope it's something that adds value to you and make you think about things you might not have thought about otherwise. That's definitely what happened for me. It got me just thinking, and at the end of the day, just thinking is a good thing. What's the worst case scenario? You play that out. And if we prepare for it, if it doesn't happen, it's not going to be a bad thing. So I'm still really, excited to re-listen to this conversation once it comes out. I hope you really enjoy it. It is my coach's name. His name's Karl Krentzel. You can find him online at karlbuyshouses.com. You can see the post I reference. It's on his blog. You can check it out. Came out, I think it's February 29th, I believe, or February 29th. My apologies. 27th, maybe. Either way. So it was end of February. And let us know what you think about the new format. Let us know what you think about this conversation. And without further ado, I hope you enjoy our extended conversation with Karl Krentzel on where things are going, government intervention in real estate, and what to possibly do to prepare and what to possibly expect in the coming months in regards to real estate. Please share with a friend. Enjoy. Well, Karl, thanks so much for joining the show. It's been a while since we talked. As I mentioned in the intro, you coached me up, thinking it's almost been 6 years ago now.
Yeah, it's been a while. You've done very well for yourself.
Yeah, just chipping away at it and still applying a lot of the same principles that I learned, back then. Still do, cold calling, still something we do consistently, and just keeping that approach going. So thank you, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. So
no problem. I'm grateful for the interview. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think obviously I know your background, but I'm not going to do as good of a job as you could summarizing it. Do you mind just kind of recapping your context in being in the real estate market and working in real estate and kind of maybe what you're focusing on now?
Yeah, certainly. No problem. So in, I guess it was 1996, I got my license. I had recently retired from the Navy. I was medically retired. And then I was looking for something that I could do. And so I got into real estate. And so I started in Charleston, South Carolina, in a great little company called Agent Owned Realty. And they were the best little company to learn from because it was just nothing but old salts. I mean, all these old veterans
Mm-hmm.
of the business, and that's who I grew up with in the business. There was no new guy, I was the new guy, and I had to learn everything from scratch. And if you can imagine, back in 1996, and I recognize it's difficult for a lot of people to conceptualize a world without the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, there was, AOL and all that, but it came in discs, right? And it certainly wasn't the multiple listing services you have it today.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 1996, the multiple listing service came to you in a form of a catalog, much like a Sears catalog. And every day, the hot sheet was printed out on a little teletype that would tell you which properties had been sold. And so that was the real estate environment that I grew up in. And the very first year that I was licensed as a brand new person, I was probably, I want to say I was 26. I'm not sure, but I think I was like 26. And in any event, wife, young child, real estate full-time, trying to hustle things out there, doing what I had to do. And then they decide to close the naval base. Now, for a lot of people, it's difficult to understand what this really means. But if you've got a large base where you are, if you could imagine them closing that base and then saying, well, listen, homeowners, here's what we're going to do. If you're affected by if you're a base, employee or a homeowner that's attached to the naval base and you get shipped off to another place, what we're going to do is we're going to give you the opportunity to sell your property. And if you can't sell your property at the price you feel is fair, then we will buy it from you and we will handle it for you. We'll buy it at the appraised value and don't worry about it. And so what happened was with government intervention, and that's going to be the theme you're going to hear throughout our theme today, is governmental intervention, because it's going to play a big factor in what happens in the REO methods to come. Now, if you can imagine the federal government coming into Charleston, South Carolina and saying, here's what we're going to do. We're going to buy off all these homes. We're going to pay retail value, or the appraised value. We're going to get well, imagine what happened. Well, within just a couple months, 6,000 homes came on the market.
Wow.
And for Charleston, South Carolina, that's not exactly a big market. It wasn't in 1996, and it certainly isn't now. And if you can imagine, roughly over just the span of a couple months, 6,000 homes coming on the market. And what ended up happening is if the seller didn't get their price, what do they care, right? They're just going to sell it to the Navy or the government at the retail appraised price.
Right.
That's exactly what they did. And what happened to the real estate market, and this is another thing that people need to understand, is the long-term implications of things. And that's when I learned it in spades really early. Because the long-term implication of the government buying up all these homes turned around, what they did is they offered those very same homes on the MLS at, slightly below retail value, but with a 6% co-op. Now, for the realtors out there, the investors out there who aren't necessarily familiar with things, just as a legal thing, let's just be honest, right? The commission rates are not set in stone by anybody, right? But at that time, it was very, very common for listing agents to charge a 6% commission for a home.
Just for the listing side?
What's that?
Just for the listing side?
No.
Okay.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because this is where a lot of people misunderstand how listings work. You see, as a listing agent, what you do is you go to the seller and you say, well, check it out. I will sell your home. I'll handle all the details. I'll get you the best price, best terms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Market the whole thing. And I'll do all that for free until we actually close. And then when we close, you get 94% of everything. And I'm just going to take a teensy little 6%. And out of that 6%, I'm going to give 3% to the other agent to bring the buyer by. And that way, the buyer's agent has a 3% commission incentive to show your home. Now, that's the normal market. And that's the way it typically is, or in many places it currently is. But if you can imagine an environment where a bunch of sellers put their home on the market and they do not care how much they get. They don't care what your offer is, because if it's not what it is, what they think it should be, well, then they're just going to take the government's offer, which they have in their back pocket. Imagine the government now has these homes and puts these homes on the market slightly below average market value, right? But they're offering out a 6% co-op, meaning the average homeowner that I was representing in 1996 as a brand new agent, mind you, I had to go to them and say, look, you've got to pay not 6% like you did 3, 4, 5 months ago or whatever your neighbor might have done. No. You got to pay 9% commission now, just so you can compete with the government. Imagine,
Right.
I was not very popular, right? And ultimately, many homeowners decided, you know what, if I've got to compete with the government on those terms in order for me to be competitive, I'm going to end up losing 3% of my value in commissions just to be competitive, not to mention the value that they decreased it by selling it below market value. Well, I'll just keep it. And that's what people did. And so buyer's agents had to adjust strategies. And this is another key point people might want to take away. When you're faced with a changing market, if you've never been in this sort of environment before, and most people can say that they've never been in an environment like this before.
I mean, I'm definitely in that category.
Yeah, let's just be honest. I mean, everybody can say, well, gosh, Karl, you've never been in a pandemic either. And that would be a fair assertion. However, I have multiple stories of situations where the government has come in, stepped in, and screwed the entire housing market. And I have some lessons for some people I think that will help. And
I agreed. So then what happened? What was the, I guess, short term and then the longer term effects that played themselves out there?
So short term, what ended up happening to the localized market trend, short term, what ended up happening is homes that were for sale by government entities sold first, obviously, but they sold at depressed prices, which decreased the sales prices of homes in Charleston, Goose Creek, Summerville, South Carolina, all those little bitty towns around Charleston, South Carolina, and all the bases that were affected by that. So whenever I'm talking on my podcast, here at Karl Buys Houses, right? What I often tell people locally is if you could imagine Davis-Monthan Air Force Base being closed up, shuttered up, and closed on in a year. I mean, it's inconceivable for people to think that could happen. But I watched it firsthand, and I saw the effects. And so very early on in my career, I learned that you need to be very, very intuitive to what the market's doing, and B, be aware of what the market and how it's affected by the government's artificial interference. Because it ultimately hurt the homeowners in that area.
Yeah. So that was 1996. And how long were you in that process of navigating that situation?
That was my very first year in real estate. And so after the first year in real estate, in that environment, I want to say I sold like 12 homes. I didn't do too bad, but my home was here in Tucson, Arizona, and my wife had completed college. She was ready to come home. And so we left Charleston, South Carolina. I came to Tucson, Arizona. I had to go all through the school again because there's no reciprocity. So I learned the very same things, went to work in this local market. Now, which is interesting, I'm glad you brought this up because imagine this. Now, here I am. This is 1997, 98, and I'm in an entirely different market. Now I'm in Tucson, Arizona. And Tucson has, they're a little bit less stringent when it comes to things like showings or whatever. I mean, things just, pretty laissez-faire, right? And so I'm kind of learning the layout. I'm still a new agent. I've only been in the business maybe 2 years, 2.5 years at the most. And I'm kind of learning the game and learning the new agents. You know how it is. And so back in the day, what I did, and this is old fashioned, I guess now, but I literally just walked around the office and I looked on the walls and I saw all the people's awards and whatnot. And I started talking to the people who were the top producers. And I said, hey, what do you do? Tell me a little bit about what you do. Oh, wow. How did you get that award? Stuff like that. When you talk about that, people love to talk about themselves. And so I came across this guy, and I'll remember his name till the day I die, but I won't say it publicly because he and I just don't see things eye to eye anymore. But I am so grateful that I met this man because I remember the day that I turned the corner in my real estate life and in honestly my professional life. The day I met this man was so fundamental My understanding of real estate, it changed me forever. Now, this guy, I come around the corner physically of the office.
Yeah.
I'm just walking around and boop, there's his office. And he's got awards on the wall, trophies and plaques. I mean, I'm just astounded by everything this man has, all these accolades. And I asked him, I said, gosh, what do you do? I mean, he's been here a while. I mean, he's one of them old grizzled dudes, right? And I said, gosh, what do you do? And he says, well, me? I do the REO accounts. I said, what's an REO account? He said, oh, well, that is real estate owned. And that basically is bank foreclosures. I said, oh, now I know a little bit about something like this, right? I mean, kind of when you start talking about government stuff, I'm used to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked in the government. I sold government homes. I understood what HUD homes were to a basic degree. But when you start talking about working for foreclosures and corporate banks, and I'm cool with that. I get that, right? And so I said, well, tell me more. And so this guy says, well, I know about all these different foreclosures as they're coming up. I said, how do you know? He says, oh, check this out. Now, there's this thing, kids. I know a lot of you may not recognize it, but it used to be a file cabinet thing. It was metal. It was big. And you'd pull this thing and you'd pull it back, right? And out comes... And there's files. Now, these things, you have icons on your screen nowadays that look like files. We had hundreds of these things in this friggin' file. I'm like, what's all this? And all these addresses are on this. I'm like, what is all this? And he said, these are BPOs. I said, what's a BPO? He said, oh, that's a broker price opinion. Banks, when they're trying to decide if they should foreclose on a home or sell to somebody else, well, they ask for the value of the home, and they ask me. They pay me, a little buck here and there to do it. But, if it goes into foreclosure, then I'm the guy who gets it. Oh, interesting. And that's where I started learning about this business and how this all worked. And once I got into that, that's how it really opened up for me about the REO business. That was my introduction, I should say.
Yeah. So, and that was 98-ish or so?
Yeah, I'd say 98, 99. I mean, back in those days, okay, you got to really understand the psyche. And look, I'm not painting a big picture of everybody, okay?
Right.
Clearly, this is not the case. But you've got to understand, amongst the real estate community, REO agents are not the cream of the crop, okay? All right? I mean, they're not your guy who's out there selling these huge houses with the cream and the whatnot. No. You got wobbly boxes. You got trailers out in the middle of the desert that have been overrun with mold. And you got angry tenants, and it doesn't pay well, right? Yeah. And so in 1997, 98, 99, the big crush from everybody. Oh man, the market's on fire. The interest rates are super low. The prices are going up. You got to go out there and sell these FSBOs, right? And I was trying to work expireds, and I was trying to work canceled listings. That's where I was, calling up, calling up a lot of people. At that time, I was probably calling, 2,000 to 3,000 people a day, I'd say. I was only working with one phone at that time, right? And, I'm sorry, not a day, a year. I'm sorry, 2,000 or 3,000 a year. I apologize. And so working expireds and canceled was very time intensive. And for sale by owners I could work them, but they were a pain in the ass. It was just, And so for me, I was like, you know what? I'd rather deal with corporate people on a lesser pay on the promise that I'm going to get more business if I don't have to deal with all this other nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, and this was another thing, and praise God, that this is not my thought. I'm not a smart man. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I am as dumb gets, and every thought that comes from me comes from Jesus. It's not me, right? And God put it in my heart at that point. What goes up must come down. And I knew in my heart I had to get in the REO business. And I got in the REO business. And they made fun of me. All the other agents. Oh, my God, what are you doing? My friend, one of my better friends at the time, called me. You know, he's selling you wobbly boxes out in the desert. Oh, there's Karl selling his little, you know, $90,000 trailers while everybody else out there is selling $300,000 whatevers, you know.
Right.
And I knew that at that time, it was the right decision for me. And I had no inclination, no insight as to the economics, but I just knew because of my previous experience, this isn't true. What comes up does come down. And I just don't know how, and I don't know why, but this doesn't feel normal. And here we are in 98, 99, 2000, 2001, and it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And even I'm buying stuff. I'm buying properties on these liar loans too. I'm just as guilty as the next guy, right? And I'm buying houses, I'm flipping houses, I'm selling them, but the whole time I've got my finger on the pulse of the REO market. Right. And I'm just kind of watching as I get more companies working for me. I started working for Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae I didn't work, but Freddie Mac I worked, Bank One, Deutsche Bank, One West, Ocwen, some of the bigger banks that you think of. Right. I was working for them, doing their BPOs. And on the occasional thing, maybe the trailer here or there, right? But everything changed in 2006, 2007. You know, while everybody else is out there talking about what a great market it is, you start to get listings. The subprime. Even Ben Bernanke came out saying all the losses are going to be contained to the subprime market. He said that as early as 2006, I want to say.
So then you started to see your BPO levels increase, and then you started getting a ton of listings out of them little by little. So you kind of first, in a crash like this is the deleveraging. Banks, credit unions, pension funds, everybody. Saying, wait a minute, we got way too much debt for our income, so we need to deleverage these crappy assets. So they start doing what? BPOs. And I start seeing my BPO order start spiking up, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And Red flag,
it's not the little bitty crappy ones. No. It's your $400,000, $500,000, $700,000, $200,000. They're in the price ranges now. Yeah. And it's not just single families, it's duplexes, triplexes. Now, people, look, they make the argument, Karl, you're not an economist. You need to have a financial analyst look at this and give you an accurate reading about what the financial market is doing. Okay, that's probably a fair criticism. But I don't need a crystal ball, to see the jigsaw puzzle starting to form and start to fill in. I start seeing the pieces coming together, and I can say, oh, wait a minute, I see this looks like a crash.
Yeah, you could start drawing conclusions based on what you were seeing firsthand.
Yeah. So I can see from my friends. I had a friend, I remember this guy so vividly. I mean, I love him. He's a good man, right? Yeah. Hearted man. But he used to go eat lunch at a strip club every day, and it disgusted me. And he would just go to the strip club and eat, and I like, how can you eat at a strip club? That's just gross. He wasn't married or anything like that. But that's just physically gross. I mean, why? He says, oh, some of my best clients I get them from there. I was like, really? I mean, what are you talking about? He says, oh yeah, these strippers. Yeah, it's non-stated income. Huh. And I was like, oh shit.
And it's just like The Big Short.
Yeah, I was like that. When I started seeing that, and when I started seeing in my own personal life, the BPOs coming up, all these agents going out saying things are going to be fine. Ben Bernanke's printing out this saying that subprime losses are going to be contained. I started selling everything I had. I sold everything. And by 2008, when things had fully started to collapse, the REO world was on fire, and everybody had a course, $500 on how to get into the REO business, right? Yeah. But by that point, the gates are locked. It's too late. If you don't build your REO relationships now, it's too late when the fire comes, because they're only looking for people they can trust. The reality about the REO business is that it is steady business and it will pay extraordinarily well. In the height of the crash, 2008, agents are dropping like flies from the MLS. All these people who were talking that smack about what a dummy I was and selling wobbly boxes, well, guess what? They're not paying their MLS dues anymore. They're no longer agents. And here I am selling 75 homes a year by myself, making $275,000 a year.
Just working basically exclusively with REOs. So
5 days a week, yeah.
So how long did that last then? Where it was like steady REOs, right? Because I'm sure there was a moment where it started inversing, and then you got into the investing side, as well. It sounds like you were investing ahead before then, but at least started coaching as well and whatnot. So when did you start seeing that switch, and what were like those early signs of like, oh, okay, like we've reversed course now and we're heading back into, I don't know, I guess a healthy market or a non-REO market, whatever we want to call it.
I'm very glad that you brought this up because it's critical for people to understand the arc of the story. At that point, as I mentioned, in 2008, everybody's dropping like flies. I'm going to the Cayman Islands twice. I'm scuba diving with my wife. I'm having the time of my life.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, there's got to be some kind of end to this, right? And so what ultimately started causing problems, at least from my perspective, was in 2008, you saw Ben Bernanke start to use massive qualitative easing. Now, I know that for you, not you specifically, but other people listening, when you mention financial terms like qualitative easing and things like that, your eyes get kind of glassed over. And I get it, because that was me in 2008.
Right.
I was listening to the radio. I was going to listing appointments or between REO appointments, going to be doing BPOs or whatever. And listen to this guy and these people rail on about qualitative easing and how it's bad. And I'm like, whatever, flip on the music, right? Right. But in 2008, what ended up happening is Ben Bernanke instituted, a series of qualitative easing, which is essentially money printing. It's adding a digit, right, to the balance sheet, which gives you automatically a certain trillion, billion, whatever dollars more. And he did this. And what a lot of people don't tend to recognize is the effect of printing money into the economy. And what happens then is when you artificially put in more money into the economy, you devalue your dollar, meaning that it takes more dollars to buy anything, whatever it is, a loaf of bread, milk, house, it just costs more. Now, to compound the problem, they also instituted a series of artificially low interest rates. These artificially low interest rates help to ease the credit restrictions and allow the banks more liquidity to buy, to purchase, to make loans. And that allowed people to go ahead and have a little bit more confidence in buying REO property. Now, on a practical level, from the ground floor, the street, investor, realtor level, right? What this translates to are your short sales, your REO properties, things like that getting purchased because the banks, as I mentioned, are simply trying to deleverage. And when I say deleverage, meaning that they're just trying to get debt off the books. And so in an environment like that, what ends up happening is instead of a massive crash, you have kind of a softer landing. And what has happened since 2008 and this qualitative easing, we've had this slight ease down into the market, and then a furtherance of this qualitative easing, in addition to the furtherance of lower interest rates, which has artificially caused this bubble to inflate again. Now, there's multiple reasons as to why the recession happened the way it did. From an REO perspective, if you're planning out there to think about being an REO agent, something to consider. During 2008, I'm getting back from the Caymans. I got a great tan. Everything's good, right?
Feeling like you're crushing it.
I feel like God's blessing me, right? And lo and behold, they've got this robo-signing thing. And it's like, whoa, what's a robo-signing thing? Well, what are we talking about? Well, now we're going to stop all foreclosures for 90 days or whatever it is until we figure out this mess that we make sure we don't foreclose on people illegally.
Mm-hmm.
And this caused an enormous stress, not only for the investors who are purchasing these properties, but also the real estate agents like myself who are responsible for 10, 15, 20 properties, 30 properties at a time, including the utilities.
Yeah.
You're paying the utilities as an REO agent, at least at that time you were, right?
Wow, yeah.
And here you are, you got all kinds of property that you can't sell. Now, I can't help but be reminded of this overarching theme, governmental intervention. Mm-hmm. In the qualitative easing, printing money, making the money less valuable, the interest rate making this less valuable money more easy to get, and then stopping foreclosures for the civil, obviously the political issues.
Yeah.
So that is yet another example where we see the bubble not going as low as it really needed to go.
Yeah, they kind of are just raising the floor a little bit about where things are going to bottom out at or whatnot.
Yeah, and so at that point, here I am. Oh boy, I got to figure out a way to raise some cash fast.
Yeah.
And so for myself, my personal reminder into wholesaling, if you will, is now here, it's 2008, 9, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I got some bills to pay. I'm thinking in the middle of the night, gosh, what am I going to do?
Right.
Whatever. And I don't remember exactly how it came about, but my brother was talking to me about this thing called wholesaling. This was, years ago.
Yeah.
And as a real estate broker, I thought, that sounds really sketchy to me. And he just wasn't really good at explaining it. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, in real estate school, they don't teach you about wholesaling. They teach you about assignment of contract, right? Yeah. On day like 3 after lunch when you've had a lot to eat. You're
so kind of goes right over or whatever.
Yeah, most real estate agents in one out the other, right? And so here's my own brother trying to describe wholesaling to me. And I'm telling him as a real estate broker, nah, that sounds pretty sketchy. I don't think so. That sounds illegal really illegal, right? He says, well, anyway, time passes. He gets his license. This is a few years later. I don't remember offhand what year it was. I want to say it was about that time, 2007, 8, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And I was, in between trips to the Caymans or something, and we went to California, as I recall. And I had my brother, he was a licensed agent at that time, watching my business for me. And he got a call from this person saying, hey, look, I hear, you're in the investment side of things. You buy houses. I'd like to sell my house. Would you consider buying it? And Kirk says, well, Carl's out of town, but I'll have him, give you a call. And so he calls me up, tells me, hey, this story about this lady and where the property's at. Now in Tucson, the property was located near, I'm trying to think of what the name of that place is, but it's a pretty popular little orchard near Tucson. It's like a little commercial place that people go to for butterflies and stuff. And the house was really close to that. Yeah. And people really like being able to go in this quaint little neighborhood and go to this little place and look at butterflies and stuff. Not my thing, but hey, everybody's got their thing. And so I said, well, great. I like that area. What's wrong with it? Well, it's got a bad roof. It's got bad this, got bad that. Oh, okay. How much does she want for it? Oh, she wants $70,000. I said, yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, absolutely. Tell her right off. No problem. Write her an offer, send it to me and I'll sign it, whatever we need to do, but get it under offer. He said, but you haven't seen it. I said, I don't need to see it at that price. Good for it. It's a great deal.
Right. Yeah. You just knew your market well enough to be able to just not have to ask any questions. Right.
Yeah, I've been an agent here in town for 10 years at that point. Yeah. And I said, just put it in there that I got like a 15-day inspection period so I can go check it out, because I'm here in California. But yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So he goes there, he signs and gets it signed for the lady. I come home, and then first thing I do, I call one of the investors that I know because I'm in REO. I mean, all these all these investors call me anyway. Yeah. I call him up, and I'm like, hey, dude, I got this blah, blah, blah. What do you think about it? Oh, yeah, I'm definitely interested. Okay, cool. Why don't we go out and take a look at it on Friday? So he meets me and my brother out at the house. Now, my brother doesn't know anything about this.
Right.
And we're talking in the backyard, me and the buyer, the end use buyer. And I said, well, what do you think? He says, well, I'll take it. He says, how much do you want for it? I said, well, I got it under contract for 70, but I'll give you 77. I mean, I'll let you take it for 77. I'll sell it to you for 77. He says, okay, great, no problem. And it was a deal, handshake.
Yep.
And we signed an assignment contract, and that was that. So I go back to let my brother know about it. And I said, hey, man, by the way, I'm assigning the interests of this property over to this dude here. This is dude, and dude, this is my brother, and he's going to be
make it happen, yeah.
And my brother says, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, as I said, I'm assigning the interests. And he says, oh, okay, all right, well, fine. And so they ended up closing the transaction. And then here we are having a beer or coffee, whatever, a couple days after the transaction, my brother and I, and he's got his check for 3% for $70,000, which was $2,100 minus his split.
Yeah.
I got an assignment for 10 minutes worth of work for $7,000 bucks. And so he says to me, he says, what are you talking about? He says, this is wholesaling. I said, what are you talking about? That's assignment of contract. He says, no, this is wholesaling. And so that's how I realized what those two were. And the realization of this transformed another aspect of my business, because once I recognized how many wholesalers there are who are unlicensed out there, who don't know what to do, who don't have any, sales experience whatsoever, their odds of, surviving their first real estate encounter are very slow. Yeah. So the best I can do is try and help them, give them some advice to, position themselves in a market where they can at least try to succeed. Yeah.
And so that's when you started coaching shortly thereafter then, I guess.
No, I didn't actually start coaching until, much later.
Okay.
I was involved, much like many other wholesalers. They go through Facebook or Instagram or whatever, social media they're on, and you see different ads. And there happened to be this place called Flip to something. I don't
Flip
recall.
to Freedom, right? Sean Terry's, maybe?
In any event, I paid $2,000 or whatever dollars.
Yeah, signed up.
And so when I got into this private forum that this real estate person was coaching these people in, some of the advice was cool. I had certainly nothing to complain about. But perhaps I think some of the complaints I had with that particular group was more tactical in nature. It's like, you're really good at giving this blanket advice, but what do you do on a practical level? What do you do here? What do you do there? And a lot of people's questions were going unanswered. Yeah. And frankly, the advice that they were given many times was illegal. And so from time to time, I'm just dumb like this. I've ran my own YouTube channel for years, Sell More Homes Now, and I've not tried to hawk anything or anything like that. And so what I started doing was just posting comments. Hey, maybe you ought to do this. Maybe you ought to do that. Do this, do that, do this, do that. And so I was in this forum, and the owner of that forum, whatever the name of it is, became very upset with me. They, in fact, had done a podcast. I want to say it was like 73 or 74 on their podcast series that was actually interviewed by me. They interviewed me. And they became so disgusted with my comments and angry because I guess in their estimation, I wasn't charging for it. They felt that their coaches needed to handle some of those problems, I guess. But for whatever event, they banned me from their group and deleted the podcast episode, which, when you're got a series 1, 72, 73, 75, 60, you're like, wait a minute, where's 74 or 73 or whatever it is? And some people just happen to like my style in the sense that, yes, I'm a little aggressive, but on the other hand, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you the absolute truth, the way I see it. And hopefully I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm wrong.
And so that was kind of the beginning then at that point.
Yeah, that's how I began the Red Pill podcast, the Red Pill Investor podcast, which is where you and I met, because I felt, let me just share some podcasts. My mom had died at that time. She had lung cancer. She didn't even smoke. Yeah. And that I couldn't really care. At that point I was still licensed, but I didn't care about real estate. I didn't care about clients and their $5,000 price reductions. but I did want to stay involved, and I still wanted to tell people how to help. So I started that podcast as a way to kind of stay licensed and stay involved. And after that grieving process, and that's really when I started coaching people.
Yeah.
And then since then, I've actually started my own company, Karl Krentzel. Yeah. So
well, let's jump to that. The one of the main reasons I wanted to connect with you about this was obviously I value what you say because I chose to get coached up by you. B, I know you have a ton of experience in both worlds, investing and being an agent. And then C, I think it was like end of February when you first started talking about on your Facebook posts or pages and on your podcast, just like, hey, something's happening. Be aware. This is not like just going to blow over. Like there's going to be some fundamental effects or changes to the real estate industry as this plays itself out. And, this being COVID or the coronavirus or whatnot. So I guess what first caught your eye to recognize that, hey, like this wasn't just like something like to, I guess, why did you focus in on it? And why did you start recognizing that it was going to be what it's turned out to be?
I wish I could say that I was smarter than everybody else, but I'm not. Mm-hmm. To be truthful, I was interviewed about this on my local KVOA television station because I had made a lot of posts.
Right, you'd been talking about it.
Houses about one of them in particular was 10 reasons why the economy is worse than you think. Mm-hmm. And I posted that in a local Facebook group. Now, one of my marketing methods, I try to do everything organically, right? Mm-hmm. I don't do paid pay-per-click or anything like that. I run a podcast to say my views about things or whatever, which generates SEO traffic for my website, karlweisshouses.com. And obviously on my website, I put things a little bit more moderate. I don't go off the rails too much, right? But in that in that website, I had said 10 specific reasons why the economy was worse than people thought it was. And there is no good time for bad news. And in this economy, in this political environment, where there's an enormous amount of people who conflagrate patriotism with economics. We're going to win at all costs, and we're going to do it because we're Americans. Well, that's not going to work in the face of monetary policy. But nonetheless, the point that I'm getting at is simply this. What first caused me to be concerned was when you have Hong Kong riots, people at that time, January, December, October, whatever. Those people, they were out there in Hong Kong shooting bows at Chinese soldiers and policemen and getting into fights and whatnot. And then this COVID-19 thing happens. And the next thing you know, in China, I'm seeing videos of them rounding up citizens and welding them in their homes. Yeah. What causes someone to be so scared? What causes a regime so much fear that in a province, imagine in America, if Texas said, you know what, we're going to be a republic. We don't want to be part of the United States anymore. We're going to be secessionists now. Right. Okay. And the United States is busy trying to quell a rebellion and a secession in Texas. And all of a sudden, COVID-19 comes up. And then Washington's first move is, you know what? We need to go ahead and wall up all the people we can round. We can round them up and wall them up and weld them into their apartment complexes. The massive amount of unrest that it would cause in America is, you can imagine what's going on right now. That would be unprecedented. But yet China felt a willingness to do this. Yeah.
So you noticed that and you were just like, whoa. That's not, even though they're obviously totally politically structured differently than we are here in the U.S., et cetera.
If you're willing to risk your entire political structure over this, then that says to me something. Okay. Now, The Chinese government at this time has said that they have 80,000 deaths or whatever, which is horse patootie. There's no way that's possible. But whatever. The point is that when that happened, okay, China is such a major exporter to the world, a monetary partner.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not Zimbabwe or something. They're not some tiny little place somewhere, Morocco or something. I mean, they're a big deal. And when that happens, not to mention all the unrestricted travel that's going on, and the reality is, monetary policy in America has real world effects, and it does not matter. And this is what I said to the people on the news at that time. It does not matter if it's COVID-19 or something else. The fact is that we are indebted up to our eyes. And anything that causes this to tip over the least little bit is going to cause an economic calamity that you have no idea what will unleash.
And so you anticipated or you saw this and you're like, hey, like I feel like this might be that whatever that event that's going to start creating this ripple effect come from China, not even like the virus per se, but just like the economic ripple effect of it.
Well, you have to understand, I think, the basic causes of this. I mean, this has very little to do with COVID-19 or a pandemic or anything like that. That's simply the needle that bursts the bubble. The bubble is the problem.
Right.
And what people are trying to do in the Fed right now is reinflate that bubble. And that's not what you want. You don't want a reinflation of the bubble. You don't want a return of normal home prices. What you really want is the government to stay out of it, for one. And for two, you want these companies to deleverage the assets that they have too much debt for.
Yeah, so probably neither of those two things are going to happen as far as the government staying out of things and there being a huge deleveraging of assets. I mean, unless...
Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that the government is not going to make the choices necessary. That's true. It's politically impossible for them to do so. However, it is not correct to assume that these things will go on as ad infinitum, because the market itself will force the situation.
Well, one of the things that I remember that you drilled into my head on our coaching calls and everything was like, hey, don't forget that what you do today is going to affect you 90 days from now. It was a 90-day cycle, and you were always adamant about it. Like, if you're hungry 90 days from now, it's because you did something 90 days ago. It's not like your feedback loop is a 90-day feedback loop, I guess. So I know here in Asheville, like we still had like a very, all things considered, a super strong market so far as listings and days on market and, list to sell price ratios, et cetera. There's a small little drop in April, but nothing like, talking from like 98 to 96% or something like that, right? Like not anything major. But June and July is when we start hitting that 90-day mark. So do you think that the actions, whether, we agree with them or not, as far as the how the government's handled this or not, is going to be enough to keep the curve from being like as aggressive as maybe it was in 2008? Or do you think that we're, 90 days from when everything started getting shut down, like, is there going to be an effect? Or is it still going to be negligible?
Okay. So the way I'm understanding your question, and correct.
Yeah, that was convoluted.
No problem. The way I understand your question is simply this, that at what point will this train stop?
If at all.
At the moment, it looks like it's going up, but Karl, you're saying it's going to go down. So how long is this going up? Is that kind of the question?
Well, I guess maybe the simplest way to put it is, at what point are we going to see an effect, in your opinion, if at all, from COVID and real estate? And maybe it's other different parts of the country you're feeling it differently. Obviously, we're just talking here from the actual areas. There's not been a huge effect yet. And this is end of May when we're recording this. So
gotcha. Yeah. Okay. No, I understand. Okay. I think that's an important distinction between good real estate agents and average ones. Right? The average real estate agent is going to look at the short-term economy and not think about the long-term implication. The good real estate agent or investor is going to look at the short-term, implications, short-term market, but then they're going to think about the long-term implication.
Right.
You know, that's the difference between those who are really going to last in this business and those who aren't. Because those who make quick decisions and don't do deep analysis about what this really means or why, right? I mean, that's probably the biggest question you need to ask yourself is why? Why is it, and it doesn't matter what market you're in, because they're all the same, right? Why is it that the average home prices are going up? Why is it that mortgage applications are up? Why is it that interest rates are 3 point whatever now? You know, the reason why that we don't take it past that first level thought is because it requires us to make some hard understandings and decisions about what those implications mean. So for example, if you're a real estate agent and you're out there advising people to sell your properties or buy properties or whatever, you can look at a problem two ways. You can say to yourself, well, the interest rates are very low and the prices are rising. So it makes sense for you to buy a property in the next 6 months because it's just going to get higher. It's just going to get up, just going to go higher, right? But is that logically true? And that's where you got to take it to the next level thought, the second thought. The second thought is questioning your assertions. Is it really true that that market is going to remain its value for the next 3, 6, 9 months?
Yeah.
Now, we can go into an entire hour as to why that won't be, but fundamentally speaking, that's the decision you have to make. And then beyond the why is how is it then that your client can best benefit?
Yeah.
Now, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, there will be across all sectors for the next 6 months or so, maybe even shorter, 3 to 6 months. You're going to see a bump in let's say specifically with the real estate market, you're going to see a bump in home prices. You're going to see these home prices go up. And the reason why is because there's short demand and the interest rates are artificially low. When people can buy property at a lower interest rate, then the seller can then ask for more. And if the seller can ask for more and there's fewer homes to choose from, then the aggregate price goes up. So the question that is begged, obviously, is then how long will that cycle last? How long will this go on? Is it possible for us to go ahead and print, I don't know, 2, 3 trillion here, 25 trillion there, whatever it is, and raise our deficits to the level that they are, and then survive another 5, 10 years on reduced GDP, which, our gross domestic product is down by a dramatic % because nobody has a job. There's over 40 million unemployed people.
Yeah. The numbers, when you look at them, are pretty staggering. And I know, if you look at the numbers as far as people who've gone into forbearance or have had some sort of loan modification, deferment, or, I should have looked that up before we talked. I know they're high.
I know many of them. And some of the startling statistics that people really need to get a grasp on is, from a historical perspective, okay? Understand that the circumstances that surrounded the Great Depression are exactly the circumstances that surround us now.
Yeah. So I think that there's two opinions or two ways to look at this, right? You're either like, hey, this makes sense to me. I can see how this is going to lead down a road where it's going to get worse. Right. Or, hey, there's no way, there's going to be enough government intervention and things are going to be okay, et cetera. I'm not too worried. So if you're not too worried about it, that, then it's not a big deal. There's probably not going to be any pivots you should be making or anything like that. But let's say you are in the camp of the people who are concerned about where we're going economically. What would a pivot be, or how do you I don't want to say take advantage of the situation, but how do you prepare? How do you show up and you're being proactive instead of reactive?
Right. And just like every good Western, right? There has to be a hero and there has to be a villain and there has to be a showdown. And right now, that's exactly what we're seeing in the markets. We're seeing the hero, which is the American citizen, right? Yeah. We're seeing the villain, which is the Fed. And we're having the showdown every single night right there on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people start thinking, you know, that it's a race thing or this, that, or the other. And his life, George's life was worth so much, and he died so tragically.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a portent of things to come. When people realize that their pensions aren't worth anything.
And on that note, like, I want to remind everybody, if you're not aware, like, I mean, Robert Kiyosaki has been talking about the lack of pensions for, I think it's been a little over a year now, maybe 2 years. I'm not exactly sure, but he even wrote a whole book about it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reality is that there are so many Americans right now who are sitting on their laurels thinking that everything's going to be just fine because their pension's okay and so on and so forth. And no matter what happens outside the door, they burn the city down. I've got my pension. I'm okay. Well, the problem is that all that stuff costs money, and all these extra regulations and all these, you know, stoppages of work and problems, things like that cost money. And that's money that cities don't have. Cities don't have it. Counties don't have it. Counties, they go to the state doesn't have it. So the states are forced to make choices. They can either go bankrupt, which they cannot do by the Constitution currently, right? Or they have to go to the federal government and ask for the bailout, which the federal government's broke. They've got no money. They're spending 49 cents of every dollar they bring in on debt service and obligations. And what are they going to spend it with?
Yeah.
You know, that's why they're printing out trillions of dollars. Now, here's the ultimate fact. If you're a real estate investor, you know, how do you make your play here, right? This third arc of the story is, once again, the government steps in trying to save the day and trying to prop up this housing market, but it cannot be propped up anymore. There is a gash in this balloon, and they're pumping as much air as they can, as fast as they can, into this balloon to try and hold it up, to keep your pensions up there, to keep your real estate wealth up there, and to keep what you perceive as wealth, your dollar per income, dollar per hour, up as income as well. The problem is they can't print anymore, and everybody else is starting nationwide. Nations that are starting to look at this and say, "Well, wait a minute, hold on. How are you going to pay back all this debt? You don't have any interest in paying back your debt. Why should we lend you our money? We're broke too."
Yeah.
And this is a result of all this fractional reserve banking that's come from ever since 1914, right? And now it's come home to roost in 2020 because now you have a pandemic, which causes everybody to spend money that they just don't have. Nobody has any savings. And now we're going to learn what it's like to be on a budget.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I think everybody's listening, including yourself, hopes that you're wrong in some way or not, and that there's a different outcome. And
a lot of people don't like to hear this kind of word.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is simply this, that in everything, there is still a silver lining.
Well, good. I'm glad you brought that up. I was about to ask you, it's like, where is the good in this then? Because there's been a lot of doom and gloom for the last few minutes. So what's the good? Where's the light?
Here's the thing. You know, a lot of people are hesitant to talk about the negative because they're perceived as being Chicken Little, the sky is falling, the worst can happen, whatever, right? Whatever the label is. But the problem is that life does not match that. Life is full of ups and downs. And if all we do is talk about the positives, then we are never going to be real about the negatives and why we got there in the first place. So, for example, the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because from my perspective as a real estate agent, a realtor, somebody who represents other people, the way that the prices have been inflated artificially and the interest rates have been deflated, the interest rates have been decreased artificially, is deleterious to my clients. It causes them to pay more money for a home than they should. And it causes my sellers to leverage money in a 401k that is currently being propped up by an inflationary dollar. And that causes them to be able to buy less home or less homes which causes me to make less money.
Yeah.
Now, what's the good side in this? Okay, well, there's a lot of good in this. First of all, American citizens, I have a lot of comfort in this. We have a constitution. And unlike any other nation, Americans believe in this sense of let me live my life and I'll let you live yours, right? I recognize that there are certain consequences and social contracts and things we got to do, but at the fundamental core, Americans by and large are libertarian. Now, they might jump into one camp, here or there the other day, but the fundamental thing about it is that this libertarian understanding of how money is actually made and currency is thwarted and all that causes you to think to yourself critically, have you been told the truth about everything that you ever knew about money? And the answer is clearly no. And if that's the answer for you, well, then you know now what you've been told was wrong.
Yeah.
So now you got two choices. You can either play outside the system, right? Go live off the grid, get yourself a farm and a goat and whatever.
Yeah.
Or you can live within the system, and work within its rules until it by itself collapses. Now, it's true. I could be 100% wrong. I don't think the history of time will show me wrong. But if I'm wrong, then you prepared yourself and you made good deals anyway.
Yeah.
So there's no net loss. Especially with REO.
Yeah. So, we've gone all over the place in this conversation, which has been really good. I've definitely enjoyed it. And thank you once again. Sure. If I'm looking for advice, what would be like the 2-3 things that you'd be telling somebody who's either an agent or an investor, regardless of kind of what they've been doing or what they do? And I know this might be really challenging to do, but what would be the 2-3 things of pieces of advice that you'd give somebody who's, in real estate full-time, not a dabbler, like somebody who's like, this is what I do?
I think that's a good question, and it's a fair question to ask, and I'm very glad to answer it because, when I first started out in Charleston, South Carolina, going around to other agents, and other agents can recognize how difficult this is sometimes. Just asking somebody, hey, what do you do that works? Yeah. A lot of times they're not going to give you the straight dope, right? Mm-hmm. And I made an early decision after that first year, after I struggled and whatnot, that if I was ever asked the secret to my success, I would gladly take the time to share. And the pieces of advice that I would give to real estate agents, to investors, to home buyers, as well as home sellers, I've got a couple pieces of advice for each, and I routinely go through them on my podcast, as you know, but just as to summarize, let's say for a new agent or any agent, right? Any agent that's facing this scenario where you now are facing a depression, because first of all, the first piece of advice I would give you is this: be aware, okay? Be aware. All right, you can't be dropped in the middle of a forest and expect to get out if you don't know where you are in the forest.
Right.
So be aware. The first thing you need to be aware of as a real estate agent, as well as an investor, is your local real estate market. You have got to become an expert on your local real estate market. You've got to understand the statistics, days on market, how many days it takes to get a contract, how many days does it close, how many homes are currently on the market, how long does it take for them to sell, all the different data that you can get from the hot sheet. You want to know that data as closely as you can, because in this market right now, the thing that's going to make the difference between the winners and the losers is going to be data. It's going to be analyzation of information.
So,
right? And there's
yes, go for it.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I think I interrupted you prematurely, so sorry, go for it.
Oh, no worries. I was just simply saying that the very first thing I would tell any agent or investor, number one, be aware, because you can't tell if you're in a recession or depression or even a good market or whatever, if you don't know what the market's supposed to be normally. Yeah. And the second thing I would probably tell an agent in specific, right? Yeah. Don't believe the MLS. Don't believe it.
So
now, Go ahead.
Yeah, please expand on that. Sorry, I'm just jotting all
I'm
these
not
things
going
down.
to shortchange you on this one.
Yeah, like that's a loaded state. I mean, you can't go from be aware, know your numbers, and then don't believe the numbers, essentially.
Right, yeah. So here's why I say don't believe the numbers, right?
Okay.
Is because, in 2000, I want to say 11, something along those lines, the Mercury News down in San Jose discovered that the multiple listing service was actually inflating the numbers during the 2008 numbers, the 2008 crisis. They discovered it a couple of years after the fact, but the fact was that the realtor board, or real estate board at the time, was using inflated numbers. And they do this so they can keep the perception that everything is going well. Look, I'm not trying to say, as again, a broad brush, that everybody's like this, but it is foolish to discount the number of dollars that go through the board. It's foolish to think that real estate agents are somehow immune from the greed of anybody else and the fudging of numbers like an accountant would. And in 2011, it was caught that they did this. Now, I don't suspect that it's all too hard to believe that they will do it yet again. The reason why I say this is because the people who discovered the damage, the ones who did it, it's a company called CoreLogic. CoreLogic, well, it turns out they were bought by most of the MLSs, and they provide now the data your local MLS. They have a phrase for that. I think it's like, if you can't beat them, something. I don't know.
Join them. Yeah.
So buy them, I don't know. But the point that I guess I'm making in point number 2 is, don't take the data at face value. Because, just because they got a sales price of, say, $200,000, well, that doesn't tell the whole story. How much in concessions did they give?
Yeah.
Was it a VA loan? What's the neighborhood like now? In one of my podcasts, I don't recall which one it was, but we were talking about the importance of due diligence. A lot of people criticize me because they say I'm doomsaying the market, but what I'm really saying to home investors and anybody is saying do due diligence.
Yeah. It's the proverbial trust but verify. It's the proverbial trust but verify, right?
Absolutely. So the third thing I would tell a real estate agent is simply this: listen to people. Listen to people. Now, the problem, as I see it with real estate agents, is we have in our industry created an ethos that everything is always good all the time, A-okay. My leg could be on fire, a dog biting me, and I just got thrown out of a house. But I'm going to post an Instagram, from here up with me smiling, everything's going to look great.
Yeah.
But when the market hits the fan, that strategy doesn't work. Now, I'm not saying you got to go out and be the doomsayer and tell people they got to, sell now or, no.
Right.
But look, if you're a real estate agent and you're walking around the back of a house and you see this beautiful rose garden, I mean, it's gorgeous. Roses everywhere. Smells, love roses. I mean, every time I think about roses, I think of my mom, right?
Yeah.
She loves roses. But what if that rose bed is on a leaky septic tank? You have an obligation to tell people there's a leaky septic tank here, and that's why you got all the friggin' roses that look so damn good. And all the argument I'm simply making is simply this, that with your real estate practice, point out that there's a leaky septic tank in the economy.
Yeah.
That there's a leaky septic tank where you live, that there's things they need to be concerned about. And the reality is people will respect the fact that you told them the truth. I get into this argument with many agents all the time. But Karl, you're telling people to wait 6 months before they buy. How are we going to make a living if we can't sell them homes? I'm not telling you to lie.
Yeah.
The chances are they're not going to listen to you anyway. How many times has a real estate agent ever listened to me? Never. Hardly ever. You're like one of the only people who's ever listened to me, right? I've coached tons of people. Hardly anybody listens to me. But the point is that those who do make decisions, and those decisions are the only ones you're concerned about. You're concerned about that guy right now, what you can do to save him. Now, if it means that you're not going to buy a house from me, I'm telling you right now, it's probably a good idea to wait 6 months because there's going to be REOs to come or short sales. and it turns out that I'm completely wrong, well, okay, fine. Maybe I've screwed myself, but I really don't think so, because the potential upside of my advice is spectacular, because you're starting to see it, and it's May, June, whatever this is.
So I mean, it's May 30th today as we're recording this. So
yeah, so I've started spouting this out in February.
Yeah,
all these agents were reporting me to the board and whatnot. They ain't seeing any of that now. Not while the White House is sitting there under attack.
Yeah, no, it's definitely crazy. Well, Karl, I think that's a good action items to end on and focus on what we can do and
Well, there was a couple things I did want to add, if it's okay.
Absolutely. No, sorry, I just dropped my pen, so excuse me one second.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
All right.
Yeah, it was just a couple things that I wanted to add. I mean, for the home buyer and the home seller, and as well as the home investor, what are some practical plans that you can do? Now, I'm an investor myself. I don't frequently represent people, but when I do, I give them the advice that I think. And when they buy, my feeling is this: if your intent is to buy right now, as I do some homes, well, then just more than ever, you need to be very thoughtful about your purchase price.
Yeah.
All the old models, all the old thoughts you had about what prices should be, or the ARV, that didn't work anymore. That's why you got to go back to that number one, know your market, right?
Yeah.
And so from a buying perspective, if you're just a home investor, you're planning on flipping it or holding it or whatever your plan is, the money is made on the buy.
Yeah.
And you have to be very, very vigorous about your understanding about the market fundamentals and what they're going to be like in a few months. And as I mentioned before, you don't have to have a crystal ball. You can see the jigsaw puzzle and understand what the picture is going to look like.
Right.
Now, for a home buyer and a home seller, this is critical information. Now, it's important you understand this. Every agent in town will tell you I am wrong. I am telling you they're wrong. What's going to happen is, as soon as these stimulus checks run out, as soon as all these companies have to, start firing people, letting them go because the PPP has run out, you're going to see a lot of layoffs. Boeing, Hertz, all those people, that's just the beginning. Something to consider, right? Something to consider. Warren Buffett did not buy Boeing, Hertz, or any of these other companies because he did not feel that they were viable assets to buy. If that tells you something,
Yeah. I was not aware of that, but I'm really glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Yeah, what that means is that when you have this many layoffs, okay, in addition to already the unemployment you have, it has a ripple effect throughout the economy. Within 6 months, you're going to see the very first start of this market to collapse, and it's going to be short sales.
So we're talking end of 2020, right? October, November-ish, 6 months from now.
And what they're trying to do, and then not to get onto a political rant or anything like that, but what they're trying to do is Jay Powell is working with Steve Mnuchin to go ahead and build or create as many dollars as they can and fund as many programs as they can to get the economy back on its feet on a short-term basis so that the president can survive the election.
Yeah.
Now, if he survives the election, it won't matter. It won't matter how many taxes or how many things he deregulates or whatever. It won't matter. The damage is already done. It's like the Titanic, yeah? I mean, you're not going to fix that, right? Now, if Biden wins, which is becoming an ever-increasing possibility, right? Then you're going to look stark in the face of socialism. And with an unlimited ability to print cash with the House and the Senate and the presidency and a nation that's screaming for help, well, then they're going to print all the more. And they're going to do it even faster. Now, you can already see in certain areas, Florida in particular, that the foreclosure crisis is starting to come to a head. The foreclosures and evictions have been postponed artificially, as many people know, but they can't stop it forever. And right now, the timeline is running out in Florida. And Governor DeSantis is trying to figure out if he should extend that for another 2 weeks, this ban on evictions and ban on foreclosures. Now, for real estate agents and REO agents in in Florida, you should look at this as, we got a warning about the flood to come, because they know what's happening. They're not dumb, and they can't stop it forever. That's why these Democratic legislators are trying to go ahead and create all sorts of pathways to keeping your home. But in the end, money has to be paid, and bills have to be paid. And people don't. You can print money, but you can't produce demand, right? Yeah. And so the problem then becomes the eviction and REO process. So for those who are thinking about getting into the REO business, I put out a video many years ago about how to get into the REO business. It's still on my website, but things have changed. Right? Yeah. Back then, I would say that the thing that you needed to do was do a lot of BPOs, get your name in front of a lot of asset managers, and then build up a reputation from there. That was the way I grew up in the business. It's similar to farming, and unfortunately, you don't have time for that. Okay? Yeah. So if you're so inclined to listen to this podcast, and I am grateful that you've listened to this much time and you've invested this much time, I'm going to give you a special tip today that I have never shared anywhere to anybody except my nephew, who is currently taking this business. So I'm going to go ahead and give you.
Wow. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Definitely what you want to do. If you want to get into the REO business, what you want to do is you want to go to ResNet. ResNet, res.net, ResNet is the clearinghouse, if you will, for the asset managers who are going to be able to interact with you as an agent to do BPOs, to do listing assignments, or whatever. So what is required for you to get on ResNet? Well, I don't make any money on this, so there's good news there. There's no promotional links or affiliate dollars or anything like that. This is straight advice from one old cat to you, right? Yeah. Just go to ResNet, right? And then I think the current fee is I want to say $795. Sometimes they have a little sale, $595 to $795. Somewhere around that is what you pay, right? Now, this is only good for real estate agents. To be a listing agent for a REO company, you have to obviously be a agent and have to have $1 million worth of liability E&O insurance. If you're in a company, typically you possess both of those. And so you can sign up there and you can begin to receive REO BPO assignments. Now that's the key. You will not receive REO listings more often not from ResNet unless you've had some experience as an REO agent. It's kind of like when you were 16 and you're trying to get your first job and they're like, hey, what's your experience? You're like, well, I don't have any experience. Like, well, shit, go get some experience and come back to us. Well, it's similar to that, right? So back in the day when you were 16, you had to go, flip burgers or mop floors. Well, mopping floors, flipping burgers, well, that's BPO work. Now, they'll pay you $50, which ain't much, but don't do it for the money. Do it for the experience. Do it for the experience of filling out the forms and getting your name out in front of the asset manager, which is what is important. Eventually, that asset manager is not going to have anybody to work with, and they're going to like you. And they're going to go, hey, I've got a couple things from Karl here. Let me shoot Karl this listing and see what he does. And that's all you need. You just need that doorway, that entryway to get that money. And once you've made that entryway, well, then the sky's the limit. You start getting in, because what happens then, that asset manager loses his job at that bank because banks close, and he goes to work at Ocwen or Bank of America or Freddie Mac or wherever, and he takes his Rolodex. It's like a Rolodex. It's like a rolly thing. It's like contacts on your phone, right? Right. Young kids may not know what that is. But the point that I'm getting at is simply this. If you wanted to get into the REO business, that is hands down the way to do it. And the reason why it's better now more than ever is because they've taken away a majority of the billing problems. So back in 2008, when I was stuck with all those properties I couldn't sell because of the federal issue, I had to front the bill for that. Now, eventually they pay you back, but you're paying all that money right out the nose for months until you get paid back. And they aren't real quick about getting paid. Right. Nowadays, they pay most of that. And they have all those teams taken care of in a separate way. So it's a vendor fashion. So it's not agent-centric like it used to be. So from an agent's perspective, if you're looking to get into the REO business, then that is my recommendation. Now, as for a home buyer, a home seller, if you've got an unwanted property, now is absolutely the time to sell it. Sell it right now. Don't sleep around. Don't screw around haggling over $1,500 for this, $1,000 for that. No, I mean, no, $1,000. You're gonna let me say 1,000 too. No, I mean, you know what I'm saying though, man. Don't let the small stuff screw you, right?
Yeah.
Because what you want to do now is take at least. Again, I'm not a financial planner. I can't give you financial advice. Seek your attorney. Seek your CPA. But from my perspective, what I'm doing now, I'm buying houses. Absolutely, I'm flipping them, selling them to some other. But then I'm taking my profits and I'm buying gold and silver. Absolutely, because it's my belief that this currency right now, it cannot continue in its current fashion. And when it does, the collapse will be biblical.
Well, that's, I mean, there's a lot to go over. You've shared a lot of great information. Thank you. Where's the place for people to keep up if they want to keep hearing you and sharing your thoughts and stuff? What's the best way to do that?
So if you're trying to just get a daily dose of just reality, not necessarily spite, but reality, right? I mean, with a cheerful smile or a story every now and again, then I would highly recommend you check out my podcast at karlbuyshouses.com. That's Karl. Oh, that's actually what I think of. That's my actual website. No, just go on to any Spotify, any of your Apple. I mean, whoever's your podcaster catcher, and just look up Karl Buys Houses with a K, and you'll find my podcast there. I put out content, once or twice a week, but more often than not, it's housing related with a spin, so you kind of understand perspectives, history, etc.
Awesome, Karl. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time again today. Really enjoyed the conversation. It was fun to kind of go all over the place and get the historical context, your point of view and about where we're going. So,
well, I'm sorry if I rambled on, but I do think that it's important for people to understand the entire context of the story. And that's why I'm grateful for your podcast and others like it, because instead of giving up the chopped up version of things, we're able to share complete context and understand where somebody's coming from. And I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think it's a great note to end on. So everybody, if you guys are tuning in, please share this. Obviously, any reviews, ratings that you leave us are always appreciated. And again, please share it. So thanks so much for tuning in. You guys, we'll see you all on the next episode. Take care.